My wife betrayed me by secretly selling our family home for $350, $0 behind my back. Then, just as I was about to sue her, I discovered she's been secretly collaborating with her best friend to siphon off an additional $200, $0 in inheritance money. How do I fight this when she's already stolen everything? I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, spilling my guts about my wife cheating on me. But honestly, I'm still stunned by how everything fell apart so fast. One day, I was just going about my usual routine, and the next, I found out she'd been selling our house behind my back for over 300 grand, then teamed up with her best friend to siphon off another 200,000 from our inheritance. It's like she turned into a different person overnight, and I still can't wrap my head around it. Her name's Lisa. We'd been married for 8 years, and I thought we had a pretty normal life. 2 steady jobs, a small but cozy house, and plans to start a family sometime soon. I always trusted her, or at least I did until the signs started creeping in. She became more secretive about her phone, always shutting it quickly when I walked into the room, hiding her texts and calls. She started working late more often, claiming it was just extra hours at her marketing firm, but I could tell she was avoiding me. Little things, you know. The way she'd brush off my questions or get defensive when I mentioned her odd behavior. Then, I noticed her coming home with a new purse, expensive jewelry I knew she hadn't mentioned before, and I caught her lying about where she'd been. I remember one night she left her phone on the nightstand, and I saw a message pop up, something about meeting up later, from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't think much of it at first, but it nagged at me. I started snooping, not proud of it, but I needed to know what was going on. That's when I found out she'd been secretly communicating with her best friend about some kind of plan that didn't make sense. It was during a late-night search through her email that I stumbled on the biggest shock of all. There were documents, contracts, signatures, bank transfer records. She sold our house for $350, $0, and I didn't even know she'd been talking to a real estate agent behind my back. The house I'd helped pay for, that we decorated together, was gone. She'd just taken the money and disappeared with it. I couldn't believe it. My stomach sank and my mind was racing. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that? I confronted her the next morning, and her reaction was so over the top. She started crying, saying she was stressed, that she needed the money because I wasn't supporting her emotionally, that she was just trying to fix things and didn't mean to hurt me. But I knew better. I knew she'd been planning this for a long time. There was no way she'd sell our home without me knowing, unless she'd been hiding everything. And she was lying through her teeth, saying she'd only sold the house because she needed to pay off debts she never told me about. That's when I started to realize this wasn't just about money, it was about her betrayal. The woman I married, the woman I trusted, had been lying to me every step of the way. From the way she talked, I could tell she was enjoying her little secret life, lying to everyone, even her best friend. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My head was spinning and I was furious. How could she do this? How could she just take everything we built and toss it aside like it was nothing? I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the money she stole, the house she sold, and the fact that she'd been lying to me for months. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. Not just at her, but at myself for not seeing it sooner. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't realize she was capable of this. The betrayal cut deep, and it made me question everything. Our entire life together felt like a lie now. I was also starting to realize that this wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about trust, respect, and the future I thought we had. Now I had to decide what to do next, but honestly, I felt lost, betrayed, and more alone than I'd ever been in my life. After I found out about the house sale and the money she'd siphoned off, I knew I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I had to act, but I also knew I needed to be smart about it. Lisa was a manipulative woman, and I'd learned that the hard way, so I decided to gather every piece of evidence I could before confronting her again. I started digging deeper into her accounts, her emails, her phone, anything that could give me a clearer picture of how far she'd gone. I remembered seeing her phone the night before, and I went straight to the cloud backups. Sure enough, there were messages, receipts, and photos that confirmed she'd been in contact with about more than just the house sale. The messages were full of plans to split the inheritance money, to keep everything in the family, as she put it. She'd even been talking about how she wanted to move away, start fresh somewhere else, and leave me completely out of the picture. I was furious, but I knew I had to keep my composure. If I wanted to catch her in the act or get her to admit everything, I had to play it cool. I started tracking her movements, watching her daily routines. I noticed she was meeting more often. They'd go out to lunch, have long walks, and sometimes she'd disappear for hours. It was clear she was hiding something, and I was determined to catch her red-handed. One afternoon, I decided to set a trap. I told her I had a business trip coming up and would be gone for a few days. That evening, I installed a hidden camera in the living room, pointed at the door where she usually met. I wanted to catch her in the act if she was planning to meet up again. That night, I stayed up late, nervously waiting. Sure enough, around 9 p.m., she slipped out of the house quietly, meeting someone at the corner. I recognized his voice from the footage, and I saw Lisa handing over a thick envelope. My stomach clenched when I realized it was the money from the house sale. The next day, I confronted her. I played the footage on my phone, showing her in action. Her face went pale, and she tried to deny everything at first. "It's not what it looks like," she said, blinking rapidly. "We were just talking about the inheritance, trying to figure out how to split it fairly. It's nothing sinister." I wasn't buying it. I told her I knew she'd been lying from the start, that I had enough evidence to show she'd been working with all along, siphoning off money and planning to leave me with nothing. Her reaction was classic. She burst into tears, claiming she'd only done it because I'd been distant, neglectful, and she felt trapped. She said she'd only wanted a better future for herself, and that I'd never truly appreciated her sacrifices. But I knew better. She'd been lying to my face for months, hiding her affair, selling our house, and stealing from our inheritance. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disgust. How could she betray me like that? I had given her everything, my love, my trust, my support, and she'd just thrown it all away for some quick cash and a secret affair. That night, I couldn't sleep. The betrayal was sinking in deeper than I expected. I felt stupid for trusting her so blindly. I kept replaying all the moments I missed, all the signs I ignored. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I wondered what she was doing now, who she was really with, probably somewhere with, counting her stolen money, planning her next move. I also realized I had to decide what to do next. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to protect what was left of my future. I started looking into legal options, talking to a lawyer who specialized in divorce and asset recovery. I knew I might not get everything back, but I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. I also knew I had to prepare myself emotionally. This was going to be a long, hard process, and I had to steel myself for whatever came next. The betrayal cut so deep, but I wasn't going to let her win that easily. I was going to do everything I could to make sure she paid for her lies and deception. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Lisa wasn't just a woman who made a bad decision or got caught up in a moment of weakness. This was calculated, cold, and planned. She'd been working with for months, maybe longer, orchestrating the whole thing behind my back. I found bank statements showing transfers from our joint account to her and accounts, all under the radar. She'd been funneling money out little by little, trying to hide it from me. The betrayal stung worse than I thought possible. I kept asking myself how she could do this to me, to us. I'd always thought we had a good marriage, that we were building something real. But now I saw that I'd been blind. She'd been living a double life, and I was just an afterthought to her. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, like I'd been punched in the gut. Still, I knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. Over the next few days, I started planning my next move. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in property and inheritance disputes. I handed over all the evidence I'd collected, messages, bank statements, the video footage, and asked what my options were. The lawyer explained that I might be able to challenge the sale of the house, especially if I could prove she sold it without my consent. or knowledge which I could. She also mentioned the possibility of freezing some of the accounts involved to prevent her from moving more money around. Meanwhile, Lisa was still acting like she was the victim. She'd come up with more lies, claiming she'd only sold the house because she was desperate and that she'd planned to tell me but couldn't find the right time. She insisted she was doing it for us, for our future, and that I'd never understand how much stress she was under. I could see through her lies now, though. It was obvious she was just trying to spin her way out of trouble to keep her story straight, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew what she'd done, and I was ready to fight for my rights. One afternoon, I decided I had to confront her again, face to face with all the evidence. I sat her down in the living room, laid everything out on the table, photos, messages, bank records. Her face went pale and she started stammering. "You don't understand, it's not what it looks like," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And I were just talking about how we could split the inheritance, how to get some extra money. I never meant for it to go this far, I swear." I looked at her, cold and furious. "You sold our house for $350, $0, Lisa. You didn't tell me, and you were planning to leave me with nothing. How do you even sleep at night?" She broke down crying, claiming she'd only done it because I'd been so distant, so cold lately, that she felt neglected, unloved, and she'd just snapped. She begged me to understand, to forgive her, to give her another chance. But I saw through her tears and her lies. She was a master manipulator, and I knew she'd spin anything to get what she wanted. I told her I needed time to think, that I wasn't sure if I could trust her anymore. That night, I sat alone in the dark, feeling the weight of everything. The betrayal was overwhelming. I'd lost my partner, my trust, and a huge part of my future. I kept replaying all the moments when I should have seen the signs, when I ignored my gut feelings. But at the same time, I knew I had to fight back. I couldn't let her get away with this. I was going to do everything in my power to get justice, to recover what was stolen and make her face the consequences of her actions. The thought of her counting that stolen money made me sick. But I was determined to turn this nightmare around, no matter how long it took. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I stayed up late every night, poring over documents, making calls to lawyers, and trying to piece together just how deep Lisa's betrayal ran. I realized that her plan was more elaborate than I initially thought. She used not just to siphon off inheritance money, but also to help sell the house, split the proceeds, and then disappear. The worst part, she planned this for months, maybe even longer. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so trusting. Now I felt like I'd been played for a fool. I decided I needed to act fast. I contacted a forensic accountant to trace the money transfers, and thankfully, they confirmed that Lisa had moved a significant chunk of the inheritance into various accounts she controlled. The lawyer I hired filed emergency motions to freeze her assets and prevent her from laundering any more money. Meanwhile, I also discovered that she'd been secretly talking about moving out of the country, trying to hide everything before I could catch her. It was the kind of betrayal that makes your stomach turn, knowing she'd been planning her escape while pretending to be a loving wife. I also started collecting testimonies from friends and neighbors who noticed her odd behavior, her secret meetings, her changing stories, the way she suddenly became distant. I wanted to build a case that showed she'd been planning all along. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we'd built, all for a quick score? I kept asking myself if I was just naive, or if I'd missed the signs because I didn't want to see them. But honestly, I was furious. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and pissed off that she'd thrown away years of trust for money and a secret affair. One morning, I decided I'd had enough of the silent treatment. I sat her down again and laid everything out again, this time with even more evidence. Her face was a mix of panic and defiance. She tried to deny everything, claiming I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. "You're just jealous," she said. "You don't understand how stressed I've been. It's just my friend, and I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You lied about everything. You sold our house, stole from our inheritance, and were planning to leave me with nothing. How could you lie to me like that?" Her eyes welled with tears, but I saw through the tears. She was a master at manipulation, and I knew this wasn't the end. I told her I was going to fight for what was mine, my money, my house, my future. I told her I would expose everything and I'd make sure she paid for her betrayal. That's when she finally broke down completely, sobbing and begging me to forgive her, claiming she was so sorry and that she'd do anything to make it right. But I knew better. Sorry doesn't erase stealing, lying, and betraying someone you promised to love and cherish. In that moment, I realized I couldn't rebuild trust, not after. She'd gone behind my back and planned her escape for so long. I'd been hurt deeply, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not without a fight. I was already planning to take her to court to get the house back and to recover as much of that stolen inheritance as possible. I knew it wouldn't be easy and I knew she'd fight dirty, but I was prepared. I had to be. I had to stand up for myself, for what was rightfully mine. That night, as I sat alone in the silence of what used to be our home, I realized this was only the beginning. The worst was still ahead, but I was determined not to let her win. Not without a fight. Over the next couple of weeks, everything moved faster than I could have imagined. I worked with my lawyer to file a formal lawsuit to challenge the sale of the house, citing that Lisa had acted without my consent and had concealed her plans from me. We also initiated an investigation into the bank accounts, trying to trace the full extent of the money she'd siphoned off. The more I learned, the clearer it became. Lisa had been planning this for months, maybe even longer. She'd carefully orchestrated her escape, and I was just now catching up. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior became more erratic. She was still pretending to be the victim, crying when I pressed her about the missing money or her sudden disappearances. She'd spin stories about how she was stressed, overwhelmed by life, and how she needed to do this for her future. But I saw through her lies. The evidence was mounting, and I knew she was trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty, into backing down. I refused to let her. I was done being played. One day, I decided to confront her directly with everything I had. I sat her down in the living room, now filled with legal papers and evidence. I told her I knew about her meetings about the money transfers and about her plans to leave the country. Her eyes widened as she realized I had everything. "You're crazy," she spat out. "You don't know what you're talking about. All of this is just your paranoia." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I laid out the facts, piece by piece, showing her I had her dead to rights. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, claiming she'd only done it because she felt neglected, that I'd been distant and cold. She said she'd been stressed beyond belief, and that she just wanted a better life for herself. She begged me to understand, to forgive her, to let it go. But I was done with her lies. I told her that her betrayal had destroyed any trust I had left, and that I was going to fight to get everything back, our house, the inheritance, and whatever else she'd stolen. At that moment, I realized I had to be prepared for the worst. She might try to run, hide, or fight dirty. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her movements and to gather any additional evidence. I also contacted a financial expert to help me evaluate what I could recover. I knew she'd do everything possible to cover her tracks, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was determined to hold her accountable, even if it meant going to court and fighting for years. The emotional toll was immense. I felt betrayed, angry, and deeply hurt, like I'd been punched in the gut repeatedly. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, so trusting. But as I watched her unravel, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This was the end of our marriage. Her lies and deception had broken whatever bond we had. I knew I'd have to rebuild my life from scratch, but I was also resolved that justice would be served. She might have stolen our future, but she'd never take my dignity or my resolve. I was ready to see this through, no matter how long it took, because I owed it to myself to fight for what was rightfully mine. The legal battle dragged on longer than I thought it would. Every step uncovered another layer of her deception. Lisa was fighting hard, trying to deny everything, claiming she was the victim of my accusations and that I was just trying to ruin her. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bank statements, the messages, the hidden accounts, she couldn't spin her way out of that. The court ordered a full audit of her finances, and it turned out she'd transferred more than I initially knew, close to the full amount of our inheritance and the house sale, plus some extra cash she'd been squirreling away. In the end, I managed to get the house back through legal channels. It wasn't easy. She fought it every step of the way, trying to claim she had sold it legally, that I'd given her permission. But the truth was, she'd forged my signature on the sale documents, and the court saw through her lies. She was ordered to pay back the stolen money, with interest, and to cover my legal costs. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was enough to make her realize she couldn't keep hiding behind her lies. The aftermath was brutal. Lisa moved out of the house, leaving behind the wreckage of our marriage and her reputation. She tried to spin her story to friends and family, claiming she was the victim of my controlling behavior, but the truth had become too big to hide. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The pain of betrayal didn't go away overnight, but I knew I'd come out stronger. I took some time to heal. I focused on rebuilding my life, reconnecting with friends, and making sense of what had happened. I learned a lot about trust, about how easily it can be broken, and how important it is to watch for the signs of manipulation. I also realized that sometimes the only way to fight betrayal is with patience, evidence, and unwavering resolve. I still carry the scars, but I refuse to let them define me. Looking back, I see this entire ordeal as a harsh lesson. Never ignore the small signs, I tell myself. Never assume someone's loyalty is unbreakable. And most importantly, never let anyone steal your sense of worth or your future. Lisa's betrayal changed me, but it didn't break me. I found my strength again, and I moved on. I've come to accept that some people are just not who they pretend to be, and that the only way to truly protect yourself is to stay vigilant and fight for what's right. I did that, and I'm proud of it.